Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I assume we've probably got a few more people working from home or guys with disrupted calendars, etc. at the moment, so we do appreciate your time. Please stay tuned until the end of the webinar, as we may have a surprise for you guys who are working from home or have been disrupted by the coronavirus. Today, we're going to be looking at Hybrid Backup Station in a little more detail than we might have done before. It's an app I'm sure a lot of you will be pretty familiar with by now, but the new version has some new features that we haven't seen before from QNAP on QTS, so hopefully this will remain interesting. Craig, as usual, will have a few demos to show as we're going through, so without further ado, I'll pass over to Craig.
All right, cheers, Tom. So today we're going to go through all the functionality of our hybrid backup sync application. We're up to version 3 now. I've got a couple of separate NAS here. Obviously, the point of hybrid backup sync 3 is to automate data in and out of your NAS, and we would generally advise that would be to another QNAP NAS. So I've got 2 set up here so that I can show you how things work with a bidirectional nature from one NAS to another NAS and back again. And I'll also go through quite a lot of the other features within hybrid backup sync that we have, some extra services and extra functionality that we've got in there. So the main screen here of hybrid backup sync 3 is just an overview, a summary of everything that's going on with the backup jobs. You get an alarm log at the bottom. You get to scroll through and see if there's anything specific wrong with any backups that are happening. So a single view glance to see if everything's healthy, a picture of all your storage spaces that you've got, and just an overview of the entire configuration there. So it's just a useful information screen that if you've got a lot of complex backups set up within hybrid backup sync, you can just look at one page, see if there's anything you need to go into more detail to check. And everything in the alarm log down at the bottom right side can be set up to be delivered to the administrator via push notifications, email alerts, any method that you set up. We've even got SMS settings if you want to get text messages from the NAS as well. So this is just the basic summary. Everything I'm going to show you today is completely free within hybrid backup sync 3, so there's no licensing for anything I'm going to show you. On some of the cloud backup features, obviously the cloud backup provider may want some money off you to have an account with them, but that's nothing to do with us. We just allow or facilitate the connection to those third-party companies that do offer the cloud services. So the first thing I'm going to show you is the additional services that we've got within the NAS. So here on the left-hand side, we've basically got the 6 separate sections that show you everything from the overview down to creating jobs and seeing a summary of the overview a situation with the different cloud storage spaces that you've got set up. So within this services section, at the top here, we've got an option for Apple Time Machine. So if you do have a network that's quite heavy with Mac OS users, we can work with them, and we work with them in a couple of ways. So the old-fashioned way of working before hybrid backup sync 3 was released was everybody effectively used a shared time machine account. That was the only option. The downside of a shared time machine account is everybody's laptop backs up using the same username and password. All their data is segmented separately by the name of the computers that they're working with, but everybody's account wasn't individual for specifically time machine. You can see here, if you were to use the use time machine account option at the top, it's just a default set of usernames and passwords that everybody must use. What we added recently is we've added the option to use your local QTS account. So if you've got an account within our operating system, which would be advised for each Mac user anyway, just so you can control permissions on what's happening within the shared storage on the NAS outside of the backup software. That will allow each user to have their own dedicated space with their own normal username and password to mount the backup storage, but also more importantly, so that they can restore from it. So should they get a new laptop or anything like that, they're able to pull the data back using their own password. They don't need the admin to come to them to show them what the sort of default username and password is. So if you can see at the top here, my Apple Time Machine software here is backing up absolutely flawlessly. It's backing up to my main NAS. So I've got it selected to that one, and that just backs up anytime my laptop is turned on. And in my home network here, it's going to talk to my NAS. So I've only got one machine connected to it now, but if I had more Macs, I would have them all connected here and working within that option there. So it's very, very easy to do backups using Apple Time Machine. It is really just a case of coming in here, turning on the feature, and then when you open up your Time Machine, it will allow you to select a backup disk, and the QNAP will advertise itself. So we use Apple Bonjour, which is a bit like UP&P on Windows or plug and play. So it's just a way that services for Apple Mac specifically advertise themselves on the network, so the user doesn't have to go find them. It's the NAS sort of shouts out that, hey, I'm here, I can do Time Machine. All you've got to do is authenticate and you can use me. So that's built into there. We've also got the options here to enable the rsync server and the RTRR server. So rsync is sort of a more commonly found item amongst NAS vendors. So rsync is a Linux backup tool. If anybody's familiar with the Windows version, which would probably be something like Xcopy from the command line days back when it was DOS, or maybe nobody's old enough to know that, but yeah, we've got it's a bit like Xcopy. It's quite comprehensive. It's got a lot of features in there. It can resume backups if they ended midway through. There's a lot of options within it, and we've also got the RTRR option. RTRR stands for real-time remote replication. And it's a bit more feature-filled than just plain rsync. It gives you a lot more stats. There's a lot more reporting. If there ever is a problem with the backup job, you can really drill down into the logs to see what's gone wrong, why didn't it back up a file, what was the problem, why didn't my backup complete? Or even if you just want stats on a successful backup, you get a lot more information within the RTRR option. And there's a lot more options in here as well, including this TCP BBR, which I'll go through a bit later on in the session as well. But that's a new feature that we've added in this hybrid backup sync 3. And at the bottom, we have our USB one-touch copy feature. Now, most QNAPs, quite a few of the racks still have it, and all the desktop ones have it. They would be a USB port, usually on the front of the NAS, usually a USB 3 port, and either next to that USB 3 port or surrounding the port itself, there is usually a button. This button is our one-touch copy button. It's a sort of multi-function button. For example, if you were to press and hold it, it can reset the HDMI output. But traditionally, we would recommend people use it as a one-touch copy button to do something with whatever's plugged into that port. So in my port, I do have one of these USB hard drives. So I do have a USB 3 1 terabyte hard drive connected, and you can choose what happens when you push that button. Just so that we avoid accidental pushes of the button doing something unexpected, the default setting of the button is basically to do nothing. It's just going to have the external drive as an external drive. If you want to, you can enable the smart import function or the one-touch copy function. Now, when you enable one of these features, you have to go into the settings to choose what the button's going to do. So it's a bi-directional operation, so you can either have the backup going to the NAS, so that would be useful if you were to connect, say, a digital camera, a car dash cam, something like that, to the front port of the NAS. You can push the button, and without getting any computers involved, it will automatically download everything from what you plugged into that USB port into a designated folder within the NAS. Another option people would do is backup to the connected USB drive. So this is great for anybody that perhaps doesn't have another NAS to back up to. Their internet connection is too slow to do cloud backups. You may want to have a rota of 3 to 5 drives that you connect each day of the week. And when you plug it into the front port, when you push the one-touch copy button, it's going to do a backup or a sync or a copy of the data from the folder you've designated to the USB drive that you've got connected to the device. So it's not a scheduled function. It's really good for days when perhaps nobody's in the office. Let's say there's a bank holiday Monday and somebody's not there. If you had a scheduled backup to run on every weekday, if nobody changed the backup drive on that Monday because there was no one in the office, you would normally get an error on the backup saying couldn't complete the backup because the drive wasn't changed. Whereas with this, it only attempts the backup if somebody is there, has changed the drive, and has pushed the button. So it's a really good way to get some backups done of the data in your NAS, especially if you wanted to take the USB hard drives perhaps off-site to a director's house, to another location, put them in a fire safe, something like that. It's a really good option for using that as a feature. And adding the paired folders is very simple. You just pick the first one, which is going to be a folder that is within the NAS. So you could just pick one of the folders, click OK. It's going to add it on the left. And on the right, you add the paired folder where it's going to go to. So it's going to go to the front USB port. So there I've just created a folder pair, and you can add multiple folder pairs. It doesn't have to just be one. You can create multiple different options, backing up user folders, different departments folders. You can back up anything that you want from the NAS to that USB port. At the bottom, we've got a couple of options, so we can enable an alarm buzzer. So when the backup's complete, it audibly lets anybody near the NAS know that the backup is completed. And you can also manually unmount the USB drive. So when you pull it out without doing a safe unmount, you're not going to get a warning in the logs telling you that a USB drive was removed unsafely. So as soon as the backup job's finished, you can have these two actions happen as well if you want to. So that's the one-touch copy button, and Smart Import is largely the same, but it's a bit more specific on the different file formats and types that you can do. So this is usually what you would use if you were connecting a multimedia device, perhaps a camera, a camcorder, that sort of thing that would import the data from those. So the next thing we're going to move on to is the different storage spaces within the NAS. So a storage space is effectively a destination or a source of where you can send or pull data from in a scheduled backup job. So I've got quite a few set up on my unit here. So I've got an Amazon S3 one set up here. I've got different ones for different cloud providers. So I've got a Dropbox one. I've got a couple of Google Drive ones, and I've also got a OneDrive option down there at the bottom as well. At the top, we've got the different options. So you've got the local NAS one, which would be if you're backing up or creating a scheduled task at least, where you're moving data from somewhere in your NAS to another location within the same NAS. We have a lot of users that perhaps create two volumes or two storage pools. Sometimes people may call them partitions. So you're moving data from one set of drives to another set of drives, perhaps offloading things that are on a set of SSDs, moving it to a set of hard drives for long-term storage. So you can use the local NAS options to do that. There's no settings required for local NAS. The NAS obviously knows about itself, so all this stuff adds itself automatically. Then you've got some remote NAS options. I think one of mine is offline at the moment, but here I've got the one in the network that I'm going to show you as well. So here with the backup NAS that I've got set up, it's showing me the overall state of storage on that NAS, how much capacity is available on it without me having to go to it to check if it's got enough free space. And it also shows you all the associated backup jobs that you have with that specific destination. So when you click between each one, you can see the different ones that you've got. So a single picture, you can see everything that's happening on the different units. When you click in and go have a look at one of the NAS, there is a speed test function as well. So if you want to push that, it'll do a quick test just to let you know how fast the connection is between this NAS and the storage space that you've allocated. So different services offer different options for doing that. So here, these two I've got connected with a 10 gig Ethernet connection. So the speed is going to be quite high there. You're going to see something a lot faster than the standard 100 megabytes a second that you'd see with a standard gigabit connection. I've also added this exact same NAS via a different method. So rather than using RTRR, which I've used for this one, I've also added it just as a standard network share folder as well. So if you did want to be copying data from another destination, perhaps it's a Windows server, a Linux machine, a competitor NAS product that perhaps doesn't have a compatible backup protocol with us, or that perhaps they just don't run any services like rsync or RTRR that we can talk to. The primary function of any other device out there on the network with storage in it would be that it would have shared folders. Usually it's going to share its data out over the network. So I've added the same NAS that I've got here over a different connection type. So this is just using a network share. And the same here, if you click in, you do also get a speed test option. So it's showing the speeds here. So you are able to still do sends of data or backups of data to another device on the network, even if it just has a plain simple network share on it. So it's really easy for that. As I showed you earlier, we do have the Amazon S3 options in here. So we have a lot of different options. So if I was to click on create a storage space, you'll be able to see all the different options we've got here. So at the top, we've got some of the ones that I do have set up, even an FTP server option. If you have a simple cloud backup option, or you've perhaps got a device hosted yourself in a rack somewhere else, you are able to do remote FTP connections to send and receive data from it. And at the bottom, we do have a lot of different options down here for some of the popular separate cloud providers that are out there. So as you scroll through, I'll go a bit slower here just so that everybody can see all the options. If you are planning to use a storage provider that's perhaps region specific, I know we had one the other week where a customer wanted one that was really just a cloud provider available in the Netherlands. They had a great deal, they wanted to use them, but very small user base. We do have the WebDAV option at the bottom. WebDAV is sort of the generic option that you can use to add the main details in. So the server URL, the smaller companies will usually be quite helpful in giving you the information you need for this, because they want you to use their service, they want your subscription money. The only way you're going to get that is if they allow your device that you want to back up to them to work with it. So here you've got some options where you can manually specify the settings for a provider that we don't quite have listed in the full list of options that we've got here on the main screen. If there's a specific one that you want adding, by all means, let us know. We can feed it back to the product managers. As soon as we get enough requests for a specific type, we will do the work so that we can add them here, just so it's a single click addition to add them in where we already know the server details and how they want to authenticate, so that we can incorporate them into the list here. It's not a promise that we can add them, but we can definitely add it to the list of requests if there is one here that's not available for anyone that needs a different one on there. Okay, so now we'll go through the different jobs. So as I showed you on the storage space screen, you can look at the jobs by destination, or you can come to the jobs section and see a picture of all the jobs that are running on your NAS. So we've got two sections here. We've got the My Jobs section. This is anything where this NAS is in control of the jobs, whether it's the schedule, what's backing up from and to where, and this is where all the reporting for those jobs is going to be. At the top here, we do also have the incoming jobs. So I do have another job that's running. This is a real-time synchronization coming from the other NAS back to this NAS. So you can also get a picture of how this one looks as well. But you'll notice there's a lot less buttons over here on the other side. So the buttons for managing this job would be in the other NAS. So if I was to click to this other NAS, this exact same job is not in the incoming jobs, it's in the My Jobs section. So here we've got the extra buttons so we can see a report of what's happened, some basic statistics, how long it's been running for. I only set it up this morning just so I could have something in that screen to show you, but it's just showing you some basic statistics that you wouldn't get by looking at the incoming job. But the incoming job does give you a picture of, oh, there's an incoming job to this NAS, where's that coming from? You can see the source of it here. So in the My Job section, you get a lot of information about the different options. So I've got one backup job at the top, and I've got a few sync jobs set up here as well. So one thing I will talk about here is, earlier on I showed you that we had a setting which is called TCP BBR. This is effectively a congestion control protocol that's on top of the TCP protocol. That if you're using it on high congestion connections, such as anything really going out over the internet, it can massively improve the bandwidth. So on this backup I've got here, going to a friend's NAS, this OMA remote encrypted backup, about a month ago, I actually turned off the TCP BBR function on this job so that I could illustrate some results from this. So we can see here that the processing speed, I only have a 16 meg upload on my home internet connection, which should illustrate about a 1.6 megabytes per second speed on the transfer. But since I've disabled it, if I look at the past backup jobs, we can see that the processing speed is only 1.44 megabytes per second for the last few times that there's been any data changes. As I scroll down the list, we should start seeing when TCP BBR was enabled. So here's the 1.6 megabytes a second that you're seeing. So TCP BBR being enabled, which is what it was on these two jobs, effectively makes the backup more efficient. So traditionally, when you're sending data across the internet, it's going to be sending the data and it has timeout options. And if it's a very heavily congested connection, the timeout might occur where it goes, oh, the data didn't get a response. You know, the destination didn't reply in time that it got the data I sent, so I'm going to send it again. So ultimately, the same data does get there at the other site. It's just some of it was resent or had to be retried to get the data there because the timeouts were set quite low. With TCP BBR, it basically gives it more of a chance to get there. So there's less retries, which ultimately means the amount of data that's transmitted is usually the end result of how big the backup job is. So if you had a 2 gig backup job, if there was a lot of retries, that 2 gig backup job might turn into actually 2.1 gigs of data that was sent to get that 2 gig there because it's had to retry on some of the data. Whereas here, what it will ultimately result in is the processing speed is faster because all the data was sent once. And that's what TCP BBR can do for you. So after this session, I will be turning it back on just so they can get these speeds back up a bit faster. So, you know, the ultimate thing is it's going to get your data across to the third party faster. And if you're using a company that does charge for bandwidth, some of the cloud providers do charge for the transfers as well. You know, that 2 gigs of data you sent them is 2 gigs of data. It's not, they're not charging you for 2.1 gigs. They're charging you just for the data you actually did send, not what you had to send to get the data there because your connection was perhaps a little bit slower. So this TCP BBR feature can really make the difference on whether a backup's going to complete overnight or not. If you are on a marginal connection, say the amount of data you create in a day just about exceeds what you can transfer through your offline period where people are out of the office overnight, so that before they start the day the next day, the backup job has completed. This could certainly help. It could knock a couple of hours off a transfer time overnight on a particularly very heavy congested connection. So TCP BBR is in there for a lot of the different options, and enabling it is very easy. When you go into the options, you've got the rules and you've got different policies. So you've got a tick box here just to enable TCP BBR. By default, we tick it. It doesn't make any difference being enabled on a LAN to LAN transfer or anything that's a high-speed connection, because usually they're not congested. Usually you're not getting the timeout problems. So if I have a backup going between my two NAS that are connected with 10 gig, this option is ticked, but it's really not doing anything in that respect because the timeouts weren't affecting resends of data. It's really only things that are going over much slower connections, like a low internet upload speed from the source site. So that's the different options that we've got there within TCP BBR. We've got the different incoming options, and we've got the reports that you can get on the jobs, and you get a nice full history of what the jobs look like. And if you want to go into the specific logs, we do have the specific logs, when they started, when they ended, and you can go into a lot more detail by opening up one of these as well, and you can download them if you need to. So that's a really good way to diagnose problems with a backup if it didn't succeed or anything. It's a really good way to get through that. So one of the next features I want to talk about is our QDedup technology. So QDedup is effectively data deduplication, but done on your backup jobs, and we do it at the source. So we're doing that on the NAS before we send the data. So we're deduplicating it. We're not waiting till it gets to the destination for the backup. It's actually happening at the source. So I do have a backup job here at the top, which is just a QDedup test. So this is basically backing up this webinar HBS folder that we've got there. So if I was to go look at that folder on my NAS, so here I've effectively got 4 files that are all the same. They're all a Windows virtual machine that I've got on the NAS, just the stored exported virtual machine. So the data inside all of them is identical. Now, without QDedup, we would be sending just over 200 gigs of data to the destination for that file to get there, because we're not analyzing the data, we're not checking for duplications. We're seeing that the files are all called something different. We're going to send them all separately. So with the QDedup enabled, if I go look at the stats from this backup job that I did, we can see that the total updated size was the full 212 gigs, 212.65 gigs, but the actual data transferred was just one of those files, so 53.36. So we've recognized that of those 4 files, we only really needed to send one. The others are just copies of it, so we'll just put a reference back to those main files. So this is absolutely fantastic if you've got cloud storage. You do have a lot of duplicated data stored within your storage system that you have on your NAS. This is going to be able to enable you to have a smaller cloud storage subscription. So perhaps you've got 3 terabytes on your NAS, but when the deduplication happens, perhaps we can get that data down to 2 terabytes by not sending all the duplicates. It can save you a lot of cost rather than having to pay for an extra terabyte of cloud storage. We're really going to be able to help out on that, and ultimately we're going to be saving you a lot of bandwidth transmission as well, because we're only sending a fraction of the data that actually exists. If everything's a duplication, you don't need to go into too much detail with all the different files. So QDedup is there, and you can enable it on the NAS on different jobs. We've got the backup and the sync options. You can turn that on, and it will give you the reduction ratio So in mine, it was almost a 4-to-1 because I just had the 4 files and we only sent one of them up there. So that's how QDedup works. Now, the file that's stored on the remote NAS would be what's called a QDFF file, which is our dedup format file. So to make it easy to restore the data from these files, if I was to open up that file, so if we go through and look at the destination, we can see that we've got this QDFF file that's stored there. We give you a QDedup extract tool. So this tool is a bit like anybody that's used WinZip in the past. It's a bit like that, but it works for our deduplicated files. So we can browse for a file on the network. So if I go to that same path, and then I open up that QDedup test file, what we'll see inside there is we've got the webinar HBS folder, and within it, we do have the 4 files. So looking at this file, it does look like it's going to be over 200 gigs in size because we do have the 4 53 gig files in there. But the reality is all we stored was Windows 1.qvm, and we've just put references back to it with all these other ones in the background. So if you restore Windows 4, basically what we're doing is restoring Windows 1 and renaming it Windows 4 for you. If you were to go in here and delete Windows 1, that's fine. Windows 1 would effectively become Windows 2, and we would get rid of the reference to Windows 1. But this is a really useful way for you to go through, and you can extract specific files. So you can take just the one file, you can take all the files, you can restore everything that you want, you can drag and drop the files out of here to any location that you want. And we make this tool for Windows, for Macs, and for Linux. So if you've got Ubuntu, Windows, or a Mac, you're able to access the data. The data that's stored, whilst it is a QNAP proprietary format, you don't need to have a QNAP running. So let's say your QNAP was to go down, somebody was to steal it, something like that. But if you've got your data elsewhere, it's not dependent on you having a QNAP to read the data within this QDFF file. This is a free piece of software. You can get it from our website. It's very easy to navigate and extract files and data from within it. So QDedup is really good for people running virtual infrastructures, sort of standard Office documents. The one group of people I probably wouldn't recommend it for would be the creative professional, simply because every picture they take, every video they take is largely unique. So there's not going to be much of a ratio in what we can reduce for everything they've got. Most of their data, if they've got 10 terabytes of data, it would be very surprising if more than a few megabytes of that was actually duplicated data. Most of it's going to be unique. So in an environment like that, it's not going to give you a great benefit using it. You can enable it if it's not going to use any extra resources enabling it. If there's nothing to duplicate, to deduplicate, it's not going to use any more resources to do that feature. So that's the extract tool. It's very, very simple and easy to use, and you can just navigate through the different QDFF files to see the different data that's in there. So now I'll talk you through creating a job and the different sort of options that we've got. So I'll do a sync job first. So within the sync options, you get a create button at the top. When you click the create button, you get 3 options. So a two-way sync is just that. It's a fantastic two-way option. So if you had 2 separate offices in different parts of the country, perhaps, you can have a NAS at both locations. You need to seed the data on one of them. So the initial NAS would have all the data on it. And then the other NAS could be set up as a two-way sync option, and it will do a sync of everything that's on the first NAS to the second NAS in the same structure. And then neither NAS is really the primary one. Once the first backup is complete or the first sync is completed, neither NAS is the primary. Each are equal, so that if anybody adds a file, opens a file, saves a change to a different file, anything that happens on either NAS gets reflected onto the other NAS. So the lowest sync time for that is every 5 minutes. So if you've got data that's being opened at both sites, there are conflict resolution options that you can enable in it, but it's a fantastic option if you do have 2 offices and you want the same data to be available at both offices. So it's a really cool feature that we've got the two-way sync. We've got the one-way sync as well, which is just the exact same thing. It's just sending data from one location to another location. And we've also got the active sync. So the first 2 are effectively for sending data from this NAS that you're setting the job up on to another NAS or to a cloud provider. The active sync option is to go the other way around. It's effectively to pull the data in. So if I was to click on the active sync option and I wanted to back up something from a server, from a workstation, from from somebody's laptop. I could select here and do the remote CIFS SMB server, and so long as I've got the drive shared on the network, I will be able to ask the NAS to pull the data into this NAS and create a schedule and rules around that. Or you can even do it with a remote NAS. So rather than having in the setup that I've got, so if I was to cancel out of this and go to my job list, so I've got 5 separate jobs here managed by this NAS, but I've got 1 job managed on this NAS. So I kind of have 2 places to check if my backups are complete. If you wanted to, you could create this incoming job that's on this one. I could have created that as a primary job on this one, but chosen the active sync option so that I pulled the data in instead. That would have been a way that I could still have had a job that's coming the other direction, but managed still from this same interface on this NAS. So this other NAS, I wouldn't really never have to log into its interface if I didn't want to. It wouldn't be part of my daily routine to check if the backup job. I could just check this single NAS and see the full picture of everything. So when creating a job, you get the same options I showed you earlier when creating a storage space. So if you click on one that you already have a storage space for, it's very simple. So if I was to click on the Amazon S3 one, I get the option for the account there already. It already knows I have an account added for that. If I was to click on the Alibaba option, I don't have one. So the first thing it's going to bring me to is to create a storage space for it. So if I was to go back to the Amazon S3 one, I can select that one. It's going to ask for the bucket name. So I've created a couple of different options here. So if I click on the create test option, you can also create new buckets as well. And then you click select. Now it's going to ask me to create a paired folder. So I could create a paired folder of something locally on my NAS, say the download folder, and then I can add a paired folder, just put it into the root up there, or I could create a folder. And then down here, you've got the options of if there is a conflict, what happens with it. Click next. Set a schedule. You can set it to sync now. You can have no schedule if you just want to check you've set everything up right afterwards. Click next. You've got all the different filter options, data compression options. In policies, you've got the TCP BBR function. So that does work with the different cloud providers out there. It's not just a QNAP to QNAP feature that we have. You can even use rate limits. So if your connection is slow and you want to guarantee some bandwidth for perhaps users in the office using it, you can limit the speed of the connection as well. And then down at the bottom, you've just got a few options of what happens if the job fails, how big do you want the log files to be, do you want to get alerts when the job's finished successfully. You can get all this different information. Click next, and then you can create the job. So that's now created another job. So if I was to go down to the job section, I might still be creating it. So there we've got the job there. So now I could go in here and I can click sync now. Very easy to set up a different backup job there. So that would work in the same method with any of the cloud providers. They're largely all the same. The only thing that's different is the authentication options. If you're using OneDrive, they want the username and password typing in. With Amazon S3, you need some access IDs and secret key information that you get from their website that you need to paste into the QNAP. But largely, it's the same options on the different features we've got there. So just to create another one, we do have a backup option instead as well. So here you've got different backup jobs. You can relink a backup job. So perhaps you've moved a NAS away, then brought it back. You can relink the backup job, and you can also restore the backup from another NAS here as well. So if I was to do a restore job here, so you could say I want to do it from the remote NAS, click the remote NAS, and then you can pick the backup source. So the QuDedup test, because it recognizes I already have the QuDedup test backup job. And the selected location, I can either restore it to another location if I just wanted to test something, or I can put it back in the original location and overwrite anything that's gone wrong on the source, the reason that I'm doing this backup restore. And then you can add a different one. So you can skip a lot, you can add a lot of different backups here. So if you've got a lot of backup jobs, you can have them all happening at the same time. Okay. So that's how you do a different restore option. So that largely covers everything within the hybrid backup sync tool that we've got. Hopefully you found that useful. Hopefully you've seen all the different options. Hopefully that's explained the QuDedup technology to you a bit better. And one of the lesser talked about features is the TCP BBR, which is a Google designed algorithm that really just helps with highly congested connections. So there's a lot of benefits there, a lot of improvements in hybrid backup sync 3, especially since the early days of when we had it as backup station. Anybody that has a QNAP NAS that only sees the backup the backup station option and not hybrid backup sync 3, you can just go to the App Center and download hybrid backup sync 3 for free, and it will replace backup station, and any jobs that you had created in backup station will be ported into hybrid backup sync 3 for you. There's no setup changes for it. You might see that now your backup jobs have a few more options within them, such as TCP BBR or QuDedup if you wanted to enable those options. But largely things are just so much better in the hybrid backup sync 3, and it's all given for free there. We aren't charging for any of the features that I've talked about in there. Everything is available in that list of options we've got there. So we're going to keep the session open for a little while. If anybody has any questions, wants to see something that I maybe skipped past on screen, just let me know. I'll mute myself for now. I'll look at some of the questions that are there. If there's something really interesting, I'll come back and I'll show something on the screen and talk everybody through the question that somebody may have asked. Thanks a lot for attending, guys. And see you next time.
Hi guys, like Craig said, thanks for joining us today. I did mention at the start of the session that for any guys that are working remotely today or have been affected by coronavirus, we've got a little gift for you guys. So we'd like QNAP to buy you guys lunch as a thank you for spending your time with us this morning. So like I said, anybody working from home, if you want to drop us an email with, I guess, a Deliveroo or a Just Eat request for your location up to the value of £20, we'll buy everybody lunch that was on the webinar today. Yeah, drop us an email. Thanks.